Hello, my beautiful scholars and saints. I hope that you are well. It is Saturday, March 16th, where I am now. And I thought we would continue. How did Michael Sugrove say it? Diotima. Diotima is the woman that taught Socrates the ways of love. So Diotima, which sounds more correct, I think. And, I haven't taken Greek, but I did watch like an episode of the Great Courses on Amazon, and there was something about like which syllable is emphasized. So Diotima, we're going to try to say that today. We just have about 5 pages. Actually, I didn't realize that Socrates' speech, which is really Diotima's speech, is so long. I think that the symposium ends with one of Socrates' followers who is like handsome and basically trying to seduce Socrates. So I don't think we're going to get to that one unless I accidentally do. But I need to start on my paper that's due Wednesday. And so I need all of you to be in solidarity with me and finish this, because I still have to read Hegel. Maybe that'll be another video. Okay. Now, when men are physically pregnant, she continued, they're more likely to be attracted to women. Their love manifests in trying to gain immortality, renown, and what they take to be happiness by producing children. Those who are mentally pregnant, however, there are people whose minds are far more pregnant than their bodies. They're filled with the offspring you might expect a mind to bear and produce. What offspring? Virtue, and especially wisdom. For instance, there are the creations brought into the world by the poets and any craftsmen who count as having done original work. And then there's the most important and attractive kind of wisdom by far. The kind which enables people to manage political and domestic affairs. In other words, self-discipline and justice. And here's another case. When someone's mind has been pregnant with virtue from an early age and he's never had a partner, then once he reaches adulthood, he longs to procreate and give birth. And so he's another one, in my opinion, who goes around searching for beauty so that he can give birth there, since he'll never do it in an unattractive medium. Since he's pregnant, he prefers physical beauty to ugliness, and he's particularly pleased if he comes across a mind which is attractive, upright, and gifted at the same time. This is a person he immediately finds he can talk fluently to about virtue and about what qualities and practices it takes for a man to be good. In short, he takes on this person's education. What I'm saying, in other words, is that once he's come into contact with an attractive person and become intimate with him, he produces and gives birth to the offspring he's been pregnant with for so long. He thinks of his partner all the time, whether or not he's there, and together they share in raising their offspring. Consequently, this kind of relationships involves a far stronger bond and far more constant affection than is experienced by people who are united by ordinary children, because the offspring of this relationship are particularly attractive and are closer to immortality than ordinary children. We'd all prefer to have children of this sort rather than the humankind, and we cast envious glances at good poets like Homer and Hesiod, because the kind of children they leave behind are those which earn their parents renown and fame immortal, since the children themselves are immortal. Or what about the children like Kyrgyz left in Sparta, who maintained the integrity of Sparta, and it's hardly going too far to say, of Greece as a whole. Then there's Solon, whom you Athenians hold in high regard as the father of your constitution. All over the world, in fact, in Greece and abroad, various men in various places have on a number of occasions engendered virtue in some form or other by creating works of beauty for public display. Quite a few of these men have even been awarded cults before now because of the immortality of their children, whereas no human child has ever earned his father a cult. So I think it's important just to reiterate, if you didn't catch it, that when she's talking about children now, she's not talking about human children. She's talking about the fruits of our labor, such as, she says, beautiful works of art for public display, any kind of ideas of goodness or justice, even the fruits of our self-discipline. So she is very much talking about those who are mentally pregnant and the intimacy that can be created between people who are sharing their education, they're sharing their wisdom. She says that this is a person that we can immediately talk to fluently about. She mentions virtue and goodness. So there's definitely a high vibration that I think she's talking about, if I can use that rhetoric of today in spirituality, etc. So it feels very high vibration, and you are talking about things of the mind that leave you cleansed and on a higher level. And so you become addicted to this person because, and she says this, he thinks of his partner all the time, whether or not he's there, and together they share in raising their offspring. So definitely talking about the Sapio-Sexuals here. Now, it's not possible, Socrates, that you two could be initiated into the ways of love I've spoken of so far. It's not impossible. But I don't know whether you're ready for the final grade of watcher, which is where even the mysteries I've spoken of lead if you go about them properly. All I can do, she said, is tell you about them, which I'm perfectly willing to do. You must try to follow as best you can. The proper way to go about this business, she said, is for someone to start as a young man by focusing on physical beauty, and initially, this depends on whether his guide is giving him proper guidance, to love just one person's body and to give birth in that medium to beautiful reasoning. He should realize next that the body of any one body, the beauty of any one body, hardly differs from that of any other body, and that if it's physical beauty he's after, it's very foolish of him not to regard the beauty of all bodies as absolutely identical. Once he's realized this and so become capable of loving every single beautiful body in the world, his obsession with just one body grows less intense and strikes him as ridiculous and petty. The next stage is for him to value mental beauty. So a lot of people will talk about this part of Diotima's speech as the ladder of love. I've seen videos with that thumbnail on it, and I guess you can kind of see that. And I think, I'm just gonna throw it out here, reading this, I might change my mind, but maybe she's saying that you're not focusing just on one because there are so many people to have conversations with, and just opening yourself up to this intellectual intimacy as much as you can is truly a delight. I don't know if I'm projecting. Tell me in the comments below why when we go up the ladder we become capable of loving every single beautiful body in the world. And she mentions beautiful reasoning. So I guess there's a combination. I mean, I think that everyone has experienced communing with another person who isn't necessarily classically beautiful, but who they are, their soul makes them incredibly attractive, and their mind makes them incredibly attractive. So I think we can talk about physical beauty, and that is still physical, I think, because you start to see that beauty upon their body and on their faces. Their physical, like facial expressions just almost change and transmute by this alchemy of who they express themselves as. And just thinking of it holistically, just thinking about how someone wears their hair, like in their own style, in their own artistic creativity. Their clothing becomes beautiful, their scent becomes beautiful. So there's not a real divide between the material and the immaterial, but it emerges, I think Diotima says, and in my experience, from the energy that you feel in the words that they're saying. And so maybe things that have more of an immaterial kind of leaning. I don't know where I stopped. Oh, the last line. The next stage is for him to value mental beauty, so much more than physical beauty. So I guess when you think about the balance between the physical and the mental beauty, so maybe Diotima is saying that it starts out more on the physical side. That even if someone is almost entirely lacking the bloom of youth, but still has an attractive mind, that's enough to kindle his love and affection. And that's all he needs to give birth to and inquire after the kinds of reasoning which help young men's moral progress. And this in turn leaves him no choice but to look at what makes people's activities and institutions attractive, and to see that here too any form of beauty is much the same as any other. So that he comes to regard physical beauty as unimportant. Okay, so there's different ways. There's different forms of beauty or different manifestations of beauty, which I think would be a really interesting, intellectual exercise to inquire about. Then after activities, he must press on towards the things people know until he can see the beauty there too. So there's kind of a seeking, a kind of expecting that you can reveal this kernel of beautiful intelligence and a beautiful mind, which is what Socrates seems to do when he talks to everybody and anyone out in, the town. Now he has beauty before his eyes in abundance, no longer a single instance of it. Now the slavish love of isolated cases of youthful beauty or human beauty of any kind is a thing of the past, as is his love of some single activity. No longer a paltry and small-minded slave, he faces instead the vast sea of beauty, and in gazing upon it, his boundless love of knowledge becomes the medium in which he gives birth to plenty of beautiful, expansive reasoning and thinking, until he gains enough energy and bulk there to catch sight of a unique kind of knowledge, whose natural object is the kind of beauty I will now describe. Try as hard as you can to pay attention now, she said, because anyone who has been guided and trained in the ways of love up to this point, who has viewed things of beauty in the proper order and manner, will now approach the culmination of love's ways, and will suddenly catch sight of something of unbelievable beauty. something, Socrates, which in fact gives meaning to all his previous efforts. What he'll see is, in the first place, eternal. It doesn't come to be or cease to be, and it doesn't increase or diminish. In the second place, it isn't attractive in one respect and repulsive in another, or attractive at one time but not at another, or attractive in one setting but repulsive in another, or attractive here and repulsive elsewhere, depending on how people find it. Then again, he won't perceive beauty as a face or hands or any other physical feature, or as a piece of reasoning or knowledge. And he won't perceive it as being anywhere else either, in something like a creature or the earth or the heavens. No, he'll perceive it in itself and by itself, constant and eternal, and he'll see that every other beautiful object somehow partakes of it, but in such a way that their coming to be and ceasing to be don't increase or diminish it at all, and it remains entirely unaffected. I think it's really interesting how she talks about only focusing on the physical and maybe only finding even intellectual beauty in one place or one person, or, falling out of that kind of love with someone. This person, well, she's talking about that. Sorry, I was about to go on a completely different train of thought. That she talks about that as being in a state of slavishness, a slave. And because I'm writing a paper on both Marx and Hegel, I wonder if I can connect that somehow to the master-slave dialectic. I don't know. Because Hegel seems to have an inversion of that dynamic and that dialectic that really makes the master more problematic than the slave, which in itself might be problematic, which I think many people have talked about. But anyway, that was my thought. So the right kind of love for a boy can help you ascend from the things of this world until you begin to catch sight of that beauty, and then you're almost within a striking distance of the goal. The proper way to go about or to be guided through the ways of love is to start with beautiful things in the world and always make the beauty I've been talking about the reason for your ascent. So you shouldn't stay maybe in if I can bring it away from people for a minute, you shouldn't stay so enamored and addicted and insatiable for, let's say, the crystals that you have, the amethyst crystals or the clear quartz crystals that you have in pendants or statues or what have you. But you should let the beauty of those gemstones inspire you to ascend to where you are able to generate and become the frequency and the light of the amethyst crystal. You don't need the physical object in your hand because you become it. You should use the things of this world as rungs in a ladder. You start by loving one attractive body and step up to 2. From there, you move on to physical beauty in general, and from there to the beauty of people's activities. From there to the beauty of intellectual endeavors, and from there you ascend to that final intellectual endeavor, which is no more and no less than the study of that beauty, so that you finally recognize true beauty. What else could make life worth living, my dear Socrates? The woman from Mantinea said. Then seeing true beauty. If you ever do catch sight of it, gold and clothing and good-looking boys and youths will pale into insignificance beside it. At the moment, however, you get so excited by seeing an attractive boy that you want to keep him in your sight and by your side forever, and you'd be ready, you're far from being the only one, of course, to go without food and drink, if that were possible, and to try to survive only on the sight and the presence of your beloved. How do you think someone would react then to the sight of beauty itself in its perfect, immaculate purity, not beauty tainted by human flesh and coloring and all that mortal rubbish, but absolute beauty, divine and constant? Do you think someone with his gaze fixed there has a miserable life? Is that what you think about someone who uses the appropriate faculty to see beauty and enjoy its presence? I mean, don't you appreciate that there's no other medium in which someone who uses the appropriate faculty to see beauty can give birth to true goodness instead of phantom goodness? Because it is truth rather than illusion whose company he is in. And don't you realize that the gods smile on a person who bears and nurtures true goodness, and that to the extent that any human being does, it is he who has the potential for immortality? So that's the end of Diotima's flashback, which I'll continue to go on because Socrates, there's like another 2 paragraphs. The Socrates comments on it. But I kind of love the burn. At the moment, however, you get so excited by seeing an attractive boy. And she's like, oh, but you're not the only one. It's a little bit of a jab, you know? And I appreciate that. So there you are, Phaedrus, not forgetting the rest of you. That's what Diotima told me, and I believe her. As a believer, I try to win others as well, round to the view that in the business of acquiring immortality, it would be hard for human nature to find a better partner than love. That's the basis of my claim, that everyone should treat love with reverence, and that's why I, for one, consider the ways of love to be very important. So I follow them exceptionally carefully myself, and recommend others to do the same. It's also why today and every day I do all I can to praise love's power and courage. That's my contribution then, Phaedrus. You can think of it as a eulogy of love if you want, or you can call it whatever you like. It's up to you. That was Socrates' speech. During the applause, Aristophanes was trying to get a word in because at one point Socrates had referred to his speech when suddenly there was a loud knocking on the front door. At the front door. It sounded like people from a street party, and they could hear a pipe girl's voice. Agathon called over his slaves and said, "Go and see who it is. If it's one of my friends, invite him in, but otherwise tell him the party's over and we're off to bed." A short while later, they heard the sound of, and then again, I watched the Michael Sugru Alcibiades. I feel like there should be like a P instead of a B. Alcibiades. I think that's it. Anyway, this dude was extremely drunk, it says, in the courtyard. This last part is so great, if I remember it. But there's his speech, there's one more speech, and then there is the epilogue, where basically his speech is, I think he's trying to, if I remember it correctly, he's just trying to seduce Socrates and proposition him, and he's also just a little bitter. So like there's some great pickup lines, and it's just, his whole speech is basically like a seduction, and it's great, and I think I might do a video of it a little later. But Socrates is just showing how he truly has applied the knowledge that Diotima dropped in their in their dialogue, in their conversation, and he's going to be pregnant of mind and not body. So so I still think I have to think about what she's saying about seeing this kind of true beauty everywhere, and just kind of always looking out for it. And I guess it shows the type of person that you are, if you look for and expect for that, instead of, I guess, being in the negative and low vibrational all the time. So I love this. I'm going to have to go to Hegel next in his section about family. It is in the third part, the ethical life, and he talks about marriage. Is there anything, what comes after that? Oh, then he talks about the family's resources. So I think I'm just going to finish reading the one about marriage. Because really my whole paper is about, I think I have 3 thesis points. The whole paper is really, or the meat of the paper is going to be about how Marx feels that love, true love, this love that, and this is where I'm using Hegel and Plato, the kind of ideal love that Hegel is talking about and Plato is talking about, or Diotima really is talking about, is impossible in a capitalist regime. So I think my 3 thesis points are going to be, it's impossible because there's no time for that kind of love that, let's just say, Diotima is talking about, since I haven't finished the Hegel. We're too distracted by surviving, mostly, from, and thinking about like the conditions that Marx is talking about, which are horrible. So we're distracted by what we need to do. And then, just thinking more about contemporary state, that we are distracted by trying to cope with the burnout and just all the work we had to do that we didn't want to do, maybe, depending on what your job is. And so we're binging Netflix, we're doom scrolling on Instagram Reels or TikToks or YouTube Shorts, and we are staying up way too late because we want to, it's called like revenge. I don't remember what the noun is. Revenge leisure, maybe? I don't think that's it. But when you don't want to go to bed because you are kind of coveting your actual free time, which is in such limited supply. And then the third thesis point, I think, is just going to be that every relationship is reduced, as everything is, to exchange value, which I don't really believe people are like that. Even people who have a lot of money, I don't think that we objectify each other normally or think about what we can get from the other person materially. I think human beings are just too much, regardless of the circumstances, and this is a good thing, but we're too much trying to be seen and wanting to see another in true intimacy and fulfillment. So I don't know if I'm as cynical as Marx is about that, but that's my thesis statement, so I'm going to try to argue it nevertheless. We'll see. So thanks everyone, and I'll catch you next time.